Okay, so service enterprise, some of you may be familiar with it. Here I am. They have a little bit of a structured, standardized PowerPoint, and we're supposed to put some of these things in, but I know there are a number of you that don't know me. So I am Jovita, and I'm the Volunteer Services Director at Volunteer Florida. We're a very small state agency, sort of quasi-governmental. Really quickly, we have a couple of things that we do. And I do want you all to know, because sometimes it's confusing for people to understand what we do, but every state has a state service commission. That's what we are underneath. The name, we do business as Volunteer Florida, but we are a state service commission. We were all established about 30 years ago through Congress and then through statute in our respective states to administer federal AmeriCorps funding. Now, here in Florida, we also have a number of other things we do. Part of the, and if everyone will just make sure they're on mute. We also are the volunteers and donations lead before, during, and after disasters through the state emergency response team, which is led by the Florida Division of Emergency Management. And then what I really do is foster volunteerism through programming, grants that we may offer, training, and then Volunteer Connect, which is our statewide volunteer opportunities platform. And then we also manage the Volunteer Florida Foundation, which has a number of special projects, as well as housing the Florida Disaster Fund. So hopefully you all, if you're not familiar with us, too familiar with us, will browse and learn more about what we do. Our grant opportunities are ongoing. So I always encourage organizations to be on our newsletter, which is what many of you all probably heard about Service Enterprise through, and then also browsing the website and certainly staying in contact with employees like myself. Okay, so Service Enterprise. What is a Service Enterprise? So the program is called Service Enterprise. If you receive certification, I think they're now calling it accreditation, you are, as an organization, called a Service Enterprise. And it's an organization that fundamentally leverages volunteers and their skills to achieve its social mission. Now, plenty of organizations do that. Nonprofits, government entities mobilize volunteers to serve. This is something else in terms of the level and the intensity and the intent and the planning and the critical thought and the decision-making that goes into volunteer engagement. So this is very kind of basic and foundational about Service Enterprise, but it's so much more than that and goes beyond that. So specifically with the goals, strengthening the capacity of organizations to strategically and effectively engage volunteers. So we all, I think many of us, focused on recruitment solely or retention solely, or those are the two things that we're just most concerned about. Get those volunteers in. This is beyond that, and there's a depth in the strategy and making sure that efficiency and effectiveness are part of how your organization is running based on some tremendous training and coaching. That's what it looks like to be part of the program and eventually achieve that accreditation. All right, so the history of Service Enterprise, just very quickly. So an organization that did some very progressive work during a time when a lot about volunteer engagement had not moved into strategic work. Again, just recruitment, not just recruitment because it's extremely important, but the real thought process behind volunteer engagement and what that looks like. Newer research was coming out that people were paying attention to and that was relevant. And this particular organization began and had done some really great work in this area. And we'll go into that research in just a minute. So these are some of the partners at the time. So we're talking about 2009 to 2009, 2010 would be when this particular organization, which is not really in existence anymore, but did some great work at the time, was looking at volunteer engagement and what it really means and what effectiveness means in the area. So California Volunteers, that's our sister agency actually, in California, started to develop based on reimagining service research, developing this service enterprise model. They used funds actually from AmeriCorps. The organization was called the Community and National Service. I think that was it. Corporation for Community and National Service. It's now just called AmeriCorps, federal government, agency. So they received funding to do that. And then more and more partners began to connect so that this could go to scale. California Volunteers developed something that was really successful when it came to expanding the capacity of volunteers, really thought about program design. And again, and what we will be talking about, leadership being involved in volunteer engagement as a core component of an organization. Points of Light ended up pulling in and owning that program, had wonderful and helpful capacity to grow the program. And now we have over 600 across the state that have been certified. So based on that specific research, here's what Reimagining Service, Deloitte, a number of other entities understood. And these are really, really key because they form the foundation of the kind of work and goals that service enterprise is trying to tackle. So the first one is a volunteer ecosystem in organizations. So volunteerism, it doesn't exist in a single sector. And ultimately, the responsibility of successful volunteer engagement resides beyond nonprofits. This is, again, about an ecosystem and interdependence. Ultimately, together with volunteers, with our community, we can grow and achieve the social mission of organizations. So there has to be this whole sense of community and connection when it comes to success in volunteer engagement. So a big part of this, and many of you may already be in this space, but Service Enterprise Office offers some additional critical thought, problem solving, and decision-making work that could really expand and enrich the work that you do. But for this one, this is about making sure that volunteer engagement is a core function, that engaging volunteers effectively can help an organization serve more people in their community and change the core economics even of the organization, the return on investment, the expansion and depth of the mission for the particular organizations, and not just somebody doing volunteer management and doing their best on the side. That human resources, programming, your finance department, all of those, that volunteer engagement becomes integrated in the same way that those other functions are. So focus on true community needs, and probably all of these, particularly this one, is self-evident in some ways, but it may not be in ways that you are unfamiliar with. So identifying key priorities in the community, purposefully seeking volunteers with those core skills needed to address those priorities, communicating the value of volunteers, not just the number of hours and not just the number of volunteers. If you have 100 volunteers planting 100 trees, I always use this example. It's from a woman called Susan Ellis. That sounds really great. The next year, if you have 50 volunteers planting the same number of trees, 1,000, the number of volunteers went down, but the impact was the same. 50 less volunteers did the same work that supported your organization. And that's just one way to connect return on investment, and be careful about it not being just those kinds of numbers, just output, but really outcomes, and figuring out, analyzing, doing that in an economic way. All of that is so critical. Okay. So the last one that oftentimes isn't as appealing or seems more difficult, but investing in volunteer engagement. The return on investment comes with that. But of course, dollars initially, it seems maybe difficult or impossible to do in some ways, but it isn't. There's 3 to 6 times the return on investment typically for organizations that go through the service enterprise program. And just like many other things in your organization, you invest money and you see the results later. But it's about making that decision to invest. Okay, so the particular group, which is TCC Group, Reimagining Service, also did this work. Deloitte conducted this pro bono because they had an interest in volunteer engagement. And this is a while back, it's 2009, but we have enough research and enough response and input from service enterprises to recognize that this is still so relevant. Really key. And we're talking about leadership, management, technical capabilities, and organizational culture. And that there was just some tremendous differences when it came to organizations that were able to apply those guiding principles, and also a number of what ended up being kind of the training mechanisms that service enterprise focuses on. And these were the top 11% of nonprofits in the country, which sounds like, a massive national United Way or something like that. And that's not really what that looked like. They were looking at qualitative and quantitative numbers and said, if you have these particular indicators, you are likely to be successful when it comes to the return on investment in volunteer engagement. So a couple of the key findings, and I won't go through all of them, but in terms of, or read them word for word. But when organizations had a strong volunteer management model, cycle, process, not just, again, and not just, I don't want to minimize that because that's really critical, but number of hours, number of volunteers, but beyond that, into a model and a strategy, these are who those top nonprofits are. And it's not 1,000 volunteers, it's not 10,000 volunteers. It's not these organizations, again, you might think of as very high level and large and international, national. But in general, they manage any number of volunteers. That could be 5. if that's your organization. So this is achievable and realistic when it comes to being the top performing nonprofits, because they had very specific ways in which they implemented their volunteer engagement model. So these organizations, they led and managed better, also were more adaptable, sustainable, and capable of going to scale, growing volunteer engagement, which also, and this is what we will always talk about, grows your ability to achieve your mission and grows the return on investment, both in volunteer engagement and the organization as a whole. So strong and well-developed human resources management, because that's what volunteer engagement is. We have human resources, which has large legal and financial and formal and informal culture implications. Volunteer engagement is still part of that. It is human capital, social capital, real people who are strongly affecting the work that they are doing in their communities. And here's the dollar component. These organizations that ultimately kind of focused on a couple of the main metrics that this research pointed to, equally as effective as their peers without volunteers, meaning organizations that only use staff, at half the budget. Doesn't mean letting people go, doesn't mean anything like that, but how much you can expand, broaden, deepen the work that you're doing. It's going to be done for less money if the investment is in a volunteer engagement model or process that is consistent in your organization. As much as so many things happen, and we have to be aware of that, right? All of these things go to scale. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. And that's part of why service enterprise is really important and profound. You could attend 3, 10 sessions on volunteer engagement. Wonderful. The implementation, because you go back to your organization and so many things are happening at every moment, at every time. How do you do this in a flexible way where this continues through your organization as a core function and isn't just, again, in a vacuum where the idea of planning and thinking about it and resource allocation just sounds wonderful, and then it falls off the edge of a cliff because other things are more pressing. And that's why this process is a year to 18 months, because you get intensive training as well as coaching over time. That if you say, you know what, the next month is crazy for our organization, we're not going to be able to have another coaching call until this time. We will work on some of the components that are important to our organization. We just can't do something right now. That's okay, because we recognize that that's the reality of your organizations, that it isn't just going kind of in this sterile way through a set of steps. It is you all being flexible, adaptable, recognizing what's going on in your organization and still being able to utilize that model. But that requires both the training and the coaching over time so that you can see how that will best work for your organization. So these are the 12 characteristics of service enterprise organizations, service enterprises. And hopefully you can see a lot of these, but through that research that the TCC group did and Deloitte, there were 3 in particular that were really powerful. One was leadership involvement. This is your senior management, which some of you may be, your CEO or executive director, understanding and having the buy-in for this. And part of service enterprise, the program, is helping you achieve that as well. The other thing is planning. Most people keep that out because the reactivity is there in terms of what's going on. Proactivity with this, and you may be doing it, but there's so much insight in this program that can be really powerful for organizations. The 5 members of our first cohort. Some had just large capacity in the communities where they were, some smaller, all of them blown away by what they could add to the work that they were doing that would expand the work that they were doing and their economic return on investment. And the other thing is training staff, all of your staff, not just the person who engages in volunteer engagement, training volunteers, what that really looks like and how you can dig into it so that it moves volunteers into a true investment in your organization and their continued participation in achieving your mission. So some of the benefits, these are just some testimonials in terms of what, well, we'll go into a couple testimonials. 80% of service enterprise organizations report an increase in both volunteers and skills-based volunteers, leading to increased capacity to deliver their mission. There are a number of other statistics on the website, on Volunteer Florida website, which is under volunteer services, if you don't remember the / service - enterprise. But there are a couple of other statistics there, and I can always provide plenty because there are so many. According to research, by reimagining service, every dollar invested in effective volunteer engagement can lead to a $3 to $6 return on investment. That is 300% that we're talking about. Hugely significant for an organization. So the process and the model. So this is what, these are the goals. Now, the specific goals of your organization will be determined through coaching, through your ideas and thoughts during this intensive training, but it's to create a culture of volunteerism through research-tested change management. Not just telling people that they should appreciate volunteers, but what does it look like deep down? Again, a lot of this you may, have thoughts that your organization has this down, and that is completely understandable. I can tell you that across the country, organizations have had that presumption and ultimately been blown away by the potential to have a larger return on investment, to create that culture and what that means to their organization and their success as an organization. Building capacity, right? We're talking about recruitment, management, and support of volunteers and retention, and the capacity to serve those volunteers, lead those volunteers, have the buy-in that's necessary for the organization to be successful when it comes to that. Engaging senior leadership from the beginning of the process. We are all extremely busy. But how, through that change management model, you're able to incorporate and support senior leadership, or engage senior leadership, educate senior leadership, which could be you. There's so much to learn and integrate into your organization as a result of engaging senior leadership. Right. So there's a very detailed assessment tool that you all will be utilizing. Will require thought, information from your organization that you'll need to be able to access and input, and it provides some perspective, some data about challenges you may have, opportunities, your strengths as an organization. Very insightful, very detailed. You'll have plenty of time to do that, and it's a team of people who do that. But that assessment is different, again, from certain specific numbers that many of us use when it comes to the success of an organization, or what needs to happen when it comes to being able to build capacity and create that culture of volunteerism. You've got to have some research ultimately and input about your organization. The training and coaching, again, it's sort of called certification / accreditation. And then there is a peer group that you will be a part of, the 5 to 7 organizations that are walking through this with you. You have those conversations, you're in trainings together, you can dialogue about those things. really helpful. Many of you are already connected to other organizations in your communities, and you all partner, you have conversation, you're in trainings together, you're part of continuing education groups and so on. This is a more specific, smaller group, but you also have access to a national network of organizations. So here's what it is going to look like. Initially, it's the application. We do a tiny tech check-in just to be sure, similar to, of course, I was providing an example of a tech check-in, which I am kidding about, but the reality that we want to make sure everyone is connected, has the resources to be right on top of things when we begin our training, our orientation, other virtual work. So the orientation will be, and I'll give you a couple of dates in just a second, but that's a 2-hour thing. Usually try to get individuals out earlier than that, but it's really to set the, have the groundwork done. And with that orientation, I'll have meetings with you all, just virtual Zoom calls to talk about where you are as an organization, how you're feeling about beginning the program. This is going to be a very intimate kind of work. We can do that because the small number of individuals in the cohort, as well as the length of time. So I'll go back. That diagnostic, that research assessment tool, it's about 30 minutes for each of the people on the team working for volunteer, working in volunteer engagement. And that has to include senior management. But the actual time for that is 30 minutes. I will do a debrief with you for 2 hours based on that assessment. And again, a lot of this is fairly spread out. Once we get into coaching, that really is spread out in terms of the months that you can engage in that. And each of you will have up to 5 coaching calls that you can have in addition to conversations with me. There's about 15 to 16 hours of training that will be spaced out as well. So don't worry, they're each about 2-hour sessions. I will do a number of those. We will also have some experts coming in and doing that work. There's a little bit of homework each time. Again, it's spread out. These are the things around February, March that will provide that return on investment, create that culture of volunteerism, grow the goals that ultimately you will establish for your organization, and really show results in a way that will be impressive and impactful, both economically and in terms of programming, in terms of culture, in terms of impact, which we know is ultimately most important. Once you have done the work of coaching, again, that's 5 to 10 hours that we provide, and you will do that with Beth Steinhorn, who is a national expert in service enterprise. She speaks everywhere. We contract with her to do everything. That's all her. She'll be scheduling those. She is a tremendous expert, and that's who you'd be working with over the course of potentially 3 months, 6 months, longer than that, to have those coaching calls that are very specific to your organization. Sometimes I pop on just to kind of see how organizations are doing. But again, it's a very intimate process where you define, look at your goals, and she helps guide you so that you can be successful in that. So you're going to be gathering your key players, and we would be explaining that in orientation. Again, those are your senior management folks and those who actually engage volunteers. You're going to be assessing your strengths. You need to be able to have that as a foundation. That's really core to this work. You're going to look at potential challenges, emerging challenges. Sometimes we want to put blinders on to things that we think may be coming because things are either going well or we're drowning about things. But that 30 minutes is a chance for you to really think through this. You'll be able to look at and stop and start the assessment. So there are some, specific numbers and things that you'll have to be able to input. But also when you have those narratives, you can stop and start thinking about how to address them and respond to them. It's about prioritizing, gaining new tools for working together. That's a large part of doing that assessment and moving forward. So these are just a couple of the testimonials. This organization having practices, systems, and staff in place to effectively meet the demand of hundreds of volunteers who wish to serve thousands of public elementary school students in our city. Practices, systems, staff. And I really like that this individual said that volunteerism is an art and a science. I think we a lot of times think about the art part, not necessarily the science. So we foot almost all of the bill for this. Ultimately, our cost is higher than this, but ultimately what the value looks like is about this much. So all the things I mentioned, 15 to 20 hours of team-based collective change management, individualized coaching for your organization. What you will pay, and this would not be until January, I think, or February, is $380. And that's specifically for the evaluation that I talked about, that assessment tool, the Service Enterprise Diagnostic. We pay that directly to Alive, which is the organization managing this program. And that's it. And then we do the rest because we believe that this is incredibly important. Okay, so some of the technical components, a number of you have already emailed me about kind of dates and costs and so on. So this is more specifically a submission of an intent to apply. This does not need to be a Word document. Literally in the email, we need your organization name. Ideally, it's whatever your IRS designation is. You can also do a DBA if you utilize a different name for your organization. So for example, we are officially, I think it's like the Florida Community and National Service Commission, but we're called Volunteer Florida. We need that first official name, and you're welcome to share what you generally kind of go by as an organization. If it's your contact name or someone else who ultimately is going to be the lead on the application process, it's okay if that changes for other components of the program. But specifically for the individual who's going to be spearheading the application, we need to know this detail. And then we'll have the application questions, everything you're going to be responding to, that's already on the website. Please, please, please start looking that over if this does seem like something of interest to you, because there's data you're going to be expected to include, as well as thoughtful narrative. So do that now, as soon as you can, or when realistic. That's in 15 calendar days. So that is your intent to apply. Now, the application is due on Monday, December 4th, but the reality is we want to know who genuinely is interested so that we can prepare and be aware of that. If we have all of the applications coming in at 4:45 on December 4th, that's fine, as long as you get it in. But knowing and expecting organizations to submit that intent is helpful for us as we prepare to go forward when it comes to decision making. Okay, so let me do something else real quickly, and this will be going on the site today as well as this recording. I wish I could cut out the technical problems, but I will let people know what minute and second to jump forward to. And so thank you all for bearing with me on that. All right, so again, as I mentioned, November 15th, that's a Friday, your intention. Now, you have to give me that other information so that I can open the application for you. So you can be prepared using the questions on the website and have those in a Word document wherever you want, but you're still, of course, going to have to put that in the application, and I can't open that until you submit that intent. I will assume that you have an intent if you provide that email. That is not binding in any way. and I will be listing this information on the website as a reminder, but I need that because I can't open an application specifically for your organization. This is not you creating an email and a password. If I send you to a website, I have to go in, enter this information before an application can open up for an organization. So this has to be provided. December 4th for those applications, I plan on very expeditiously reviewing those because this is really important that we get going. I know what we need to look for. So this is something, please put a lot of time and energy into it so that your organization is competitive in the process. So you'll know pretty quickly about whether or not your organization has been approved. Like I said, we're looking at 5 to 7 organizations for this cohort. And so probably, well, I have Monday, December 11th to notify organizations whether they have been approved or not. And then Thursday, December 14th. So mark that because you may very well be one of the organizations that is selected. That will be our orientation. It will be 2 hours, probably at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We can always discuss missing trainings or the orientation, because those are the ones that have very specific dates and times. But the expectation is at least one member of your team is going to participate in any of these. Again, we know that there are so many things going on. We will talk about that personally because maybe it's reviewing a recorded session, but also a quick 15 minutes with me to make sure you have that actual interaction in addition to watching a recording. So we will work on that. So the date for Sharon, is this the date for submitting the application? Is that what you're asking about? If that's it, it's December 4th. Oh, the orientation, December 14th, be that date. You know, we're into the holidays, but we really need to have those expectations and understanding set before we kind of get into some of the crazy in the weeks after that. As I mentioned, if there's no one, because again, you're going to have key players, not just yourself participating. So one of those people ideally is on that call. And if they aren't, if you can't get someone, we will talk about reviewing the recording, but also having a quick debrief with me. Again, we don't want this to be in a vacuum. We want interaction. We want to be able to say what stood out to you, what didn't. I will be hammering people about making sure they're speaking up during these things. I know people don't like that, but the value of this also comes in interaction and not just me sharing slides and speaking about a topic or one of the individuals we've hired doing that. So all of this is going to go on the website in addition to the recording by COB today. Any other questions? I think you all are able to unmute if you need to, or you can ask something quickly in the chat, but the dates will be available. I will go back through a couple of those emails. Some of you may have, I don't think anyone said I'm going to apply. I think those were just valid and timely questions that needed to be responded to. So if you have an intent, and if you don't end up applying, that's fine too. There's nothing binding about it. But after this, and after looking at the application questions, look on the Points of Light website, the Alive website, all of those things that are also already on the page, the Service Enterprise page within our website. And you think that this is appealing to you, go ahead and send that to me. You'll have the application open. If you decide to do it, great. If you don't, great. Or, not great for me, because I would love to connect with you all. So again, any questions you're welcome to ask. I will tell you really quickly, if you're on our, if you're part of one of our, if you've subscribed to one of our newsletters, we do have a volunteer engagement series starting in a couple of weeks with a few different trainings. All of our recordings of trainings are available under the volunteer services tab under resources. You can always look at anything over the past several years. We have dozens of recordings there, and most of what we are doing in the next month or so will be recorded, but wanted to give you all a heads up that we're doing that as Alive in Points of Light. Yes, great question. So Alive is a national member-based organization for volunteer engagement leaders. So they do continuing education, networking. They're a professional association, and they're really the main kind of only one that we have in the US. Points of Light is an international organization, and they are they partnered and ultimately absorbed the program once after California Volunteers established it and implemented it. Points of Light, wonderful organization. I strongly suggest looking at their website and what they offer. They are just really the standard on things. They did a request for proposals, I believe, to have an organization kind of contract with them to do to outsource service enterprise. Alive won that, and Alive, I'm so sorry, I work from home on Tuesdays, so I apologize for that. I think there's a package at the door, but Alive won that contract. So Alive is the one administering the program. So we kind of respond to them. We pay a license to do service enterprise as a service enterprise hub. And then we support organizations in our state to do that, or, certain communities. So Alive is who is kind of our head when it comes to service enterprise, when it comes to the education I do as a trainer, again, the license to be able to do this. And so organizations around the country have to be licensed through Alive, who contracted with Points of Light in order to do this. But Points of Light originally housed the organization just about a year or two ago. Alive took that over. So the structure is really important. And so, Jessica, I'm so glad that you asked that, because that's kind of what it looks like in terms of how we got to this place of being able to be an official hub that is able to submit to Alive organizations that we think should be certified / accredited. So Alive, that's more than what you asked, but Alive and Points of Light are separate entities completely. Any other thoughts? I am at 11 o'clock. Thank you all so much. Please email me if you have additional questions. And again, this recording will be here and available. I will be sure to put the timeline, all of that on the website latest early tomorrow morning. But you all I really appreciate you being part of this orientation, info session. There's a lot to think about when it comes to this work. We want everyone to be successful, but you all have to assess whether or not you think this is something that would be realistic. So please, I'm happy to, a couple of you have asked about phone calls, and I've mentioned, later this week, we could hop on a call about it. It's not an official grant process, so there's nothing that is, I can't speak to you about XYZ. I am happy to tell you whatever it is, because it's just a program with some applications just so that we can determine who will go through the program. So it's just different from an official grant in some way. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Jennifer. I always am hoping that I was covered what I needed to realistically. So I appreciate that. Please email me. Happy again to have a phone call. I work remotely on Thursday, so there could be a doorbell ring as well then, but ultimately would be focused. Thank you all for your patience when it comes to technical problems. Okay, certification involves staff or staff and board of direction. Communication, yes, completely understand that. Because the process is so long, you will be gathering the evidence, because you will have that, of your ability to be certified over time. And so once you hit the certification process, that's one time for 3 hours a year from now that you all will figure out with Beth and myself that you will spend time doing. Now, for the training and so on, we want as many of the key players that you determine to be on those trainings. They'll be recorded, and I will work with you on that and realistically what that might look like. It's not everybody. It's pitching and thinking about who is invested or potentially could be invested more so because they walk through this. So I totally understand communications. It's a lot. Boards specifically, in the initial stages, we would like for them, like the orientation, to participate, but we're more looking at staff almost exclusively to be the ones doing the trainings. And we know that it won't be all 3 members or even 2 members or 5 members that you think are relevant to the work that you're doing. With Service Enterprise, it may be 2 people, but there are several senior management folks that we would like to participate in several things. This is all something that I can have conversations with you about. We can have calls about. You can tell me who you'd like to have, realistically, who you think can be part of it. But really, this is going to be staff, maybe a board member for 1 thing or 2 things. Staff, but board members are not going to be intimately involved in this. This is going to be staff and navigating which staff are most relevant as well as most ultimately available, because I do understand that everyone is busy. That's why we give a lot of time and information so that that flexibility is available for you all to participate. So again, so much talking that I do. If I get a question, you're going to get way more than you probably bargained for. But I want to make sure that you all recognize what you would be potentially getting into and getting out of being a part of this program. So you'll see on the Service Enterprise site the organizations that went through it this last time. So you can go to their websites if you want, just look at who they are, what they do. You could reach out to them. I mean, that's not a problem if you wanted to, but we have some wonderful, wonderful feedback from them. Just extremely powerful and effective and efficient program. So thank you all so much. I apologize for the 5 minutes over and the spooky technical delay. Again, the recording will be available later today, and all of the dates and other details tomorrow. Please share your intent to apply if you have one. All of that, again, on the page, recording everything. So thank you all so much. I recognize some of you and love all of your organizations and the great work that you do in our state. I very personally care so much about everything that you all are doing. My graduate degree is social work, social policy, administration. This is everything I've done in my career. And so I want you to know I've worked locally and care very much about what you all are doing to impact Floridians or the environment or animals, anything. Thank you all. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and don't blacklist me for my 7 minutes over. So thank you all. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Please contact me if you'd like to have more conversation about this. And please look at the resources to help you determine whether you think this might be beneficial or relevant for your organization. So I appreciate you all, and I have a wonderful day.